Good evening to you. Thank you for your company on Ben Leo tonight. It was a tale of two protests today as fed-up Brits took to the streets in Epping and Canary Wharf. Let's start with the Bell Hotel in Epping in Essex. There it is on your screens, where multiple asylum seekers have been charged in recent months with various crimes, including sexual assault. Well, the atmosphere down there was jovial, it was peaceful and, in my opinion, constructive. Meanwhile, though, at the Britannia Hotel in Canary Wharf in central London, where a hotel migrant was this week charged with assault, police officers made 6 arrests as hundreds of protesters gathered to voice their anger. I chose to go down to the calmer of the two, it turned out, in Epping in Essex this afternoon, where Shadow Justice Secretary Robert Jenrick was spotted speaking to locals about their concerns. This is what he had to say to me.
As far as I know, correct me if I'm wrong, are you one of the first MPs to come down to one of these protests? I know Suella was in Waterlooville, but she's the sitting MP, right, so slightly different. Have you been down to one of these before?
I haven't, but I was driving into London and I knew this was going to be happening, and so I wanted to come and show my support and solidarity, frankly, for everybody that's here. I've been writing about this, I've been on the media, but I felt I should come and say that I support these guys. I understand why they're doing this, and they're right to do it. 170,000 people, mostly undocumented young men, have broken into our country. We've had all these hotels who are spending billions of pounds on this, and I think the patience of the British people has just snapped. Frankly, it probably snapped a long time ago.
Well, there's been a narrative, hasn't there, about these hotel protests, that they've been hijacked by the so-called far right, or racists have been bussed in from different parts of the country. I asked Mr Jenrick about who was protesting today and why they'd gathered.
This narrative from the left side of the argument that these are sort of far-right thugs and racists who have been bussed in. You've been speaking to a lot of these people. Tell the viewers, who are these people here?
Well, I chatted to a number of people. These are just really good local people. I've chatted to mums and their daughters, dads, granddads, young and old, some young lads, people who just are really worried about the impact this is having on their lives, on their community. And I understand that. You know, I've said that I wouldn't want this in my community. I would be worried about my own daughters who are 10 and 12 and 14, and I come to this from a very simple principle that if I don't want this for my kids and my neighbourhood, why should it be happening for anyone's kids and anyone's neighbourhood?
Meanwhile, down the road in Canary Wharf in central London, which saw protests outside the Britannia Hotel, we spoke to 2 of the self-proclaimed pink ladies who told us why they were there.
I've been speaking to the police, who have now put police officers and PCOs in the parks during the holidays, OK? Because as mothers and grandmothers, we've already seen people hanging around there. When they go back to school, we've got a pink patrol, because we're pink ladies, and we will patrol the Isle of Dogs to protect the children, because these guys don't. I witnessed for the first time in all my life second-tier policing, because we've been here. I asked for an escort on our First Ladies' march. I was told there wasn't anybody around. And then last Friday, the lefties had about 300 police all protecting them. That's not fair.
Allegations of 2-tier policing. You'll remember last night, if you tuned in, that I was in Bolton in Greater Manchester looking at the issue of HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy, which are now being used en masse to disperse asylum seekers from hotels into private residential properties in communities like yours all across the country. So if you don't know what HMOs are, they're basically converted houses in streets up and down Britain which have 4, 5, 6, 7 or even more migrants crammed into while their asylum claims are dealt with. And as I revealed last night, for example, in Bolton, where I went yesterday, the city has gone from 107 HMOs to more than 700 in just a few years. I put the concern of the rise of HMOs to Mr Jenrick today.
Are HMOs going to be the new hotels? The same sort of level of concern, protest and objections to where we house asylum seekers?
Yeah, look, I think they are, and this is almost like an attempt to cover up the problem. So maybe in time you close the hotels, which are very visible, and then everybody's moved into private housing, which perhaps you don't see so much, but it's still very impactful, and it's the same people, mostly undocumented young men. They might not be living in the hotel, but they might be living as your next door neighbours. At the end of the day, we just got to stop talking about how you manage the symptoms of this and how we actually fix it once and for all. And the answer to that has to be that you deport people who come here illegally.
Well, someone who was watching last night was the City of London councillor Susan Hall, the former Tory London mayoral candidate.
They may move these people out, they'll only put more people in. That's the first thing, and these people are then still going to be in exactly the same position. And where are they putting them? I was watching Ben Leo last night, where a mother and her 2 children had been removed from a property so they could put 5 or 6 asylum seekers in there. What is this going to do with local communities? And what's happened to that poor woman? And that must be replicated all over the country. I watched Ben's programme last night and I was quite horrified.
Well,
shameless, Ben. Absolutely shameless.
A shameless plug. Well, look, there is a glimmer of hope at the end of the migrant madness tunnel, I argue, because all this hotel nonsense could soon be potentially coming to an end if Epping Council wins a crucial High Court challenge on Tuesday next week, where they're bidding to get the hotel shut down by claiming the owners of the hotel breached planning laws. Epping resident and Reform UK branch manager Karen McIver told me what could happen if the result went their way.
This place does close as a result of that case. Will that set a precedent for the rest of the country?
Well, I hope it does. I really hope it does. But I've called Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper out on national TV twice and they've ignored me. I've said to them they need to come and see this for themselves. They've been very quiet. They haven't been here. And now you're seeing this rippling effect throughout the country. Us ordinary, hard-working British people have had enough. We've had enough. We don't want this in our backyard. No. We haven't asked for it, and it needs to close.
Yeah. All right, there we go. Let's get the thoughts of my panel now. The Mayor of Greater Lincolnshire, Dame Andrea Jenkins, the former Labour Minister, Bill Rammell, and GB News contributor and Saturday 5 superstar Will Kingston. Good evening, panel. Welcome.
Hi.
G'day. Welcome along. Bill, we'll start with you. What's your take on the ongoing hotel situation? And one thing I want to talk about in depth is the rise of HMOs, these houses of multiple occupancy, which I think, as I understand, the government is now using increasingly more to get these hotels' numbers down.
So the Bell Hotel in Epping is about 5 miles from my house. I know the area very well, and it concerns me what is happening. And I understand the grievances of ordinary people. However, it is a reality that in Epping, and some of the organisers of the Epping residents have expressed this concern, that some far-right groups are trying to get involved. The Homeland Party, the British National Party and others.
Yeah, the Times did a piece on that.
And that's unacceptable. But the key to this is reducing migration numbers, reducing asylum numbers. But as I've argued on this show before, that will take time. In respect of HMOs, the reason the government is trying to progressively end the use of hotels, and HMOs are less expensive than putting asylum seekers in hotels. But I acknowledge that creates a tension with people saying, well, why can't, if I'm on the housing waiting list, why can't I be put in a HMO? And the only solution to this is to bring the numbers down and to do what the government is committed to doing, which is a major house building programme.
Right, but the fact of the matter is the numbers aren't coming down, are they? It's more than 50,000 since Labour took power last year. So you just wonder, I mean, where does this end? I know we've spoken in the past, Bill, you and I, you've said, you know, give it time. They've only been in power for 5, 6, 7, 8 months. When do we start saying, hang on a minute, and even people like you who are Labour supporters, former Labour Minister, when do you start saying, right, Prime Minister, something's not working?
11 months ago.
I think the building blocks are in place. So the deal with France, the border security bill, which is just becoming law, a significant ramping up of returns agreements. I expect that to start having an impact over the next 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
But I'd be lying if I said it can and will happen sooner than that.
All right, Dame Andrea, what's your thoughts as a Reform contingent here, seeing Robert Jenrick down at the Epping protest today? I think he was probably, as far as I understand, the first MP to go down to one of these protests. Suella Braverman was at the Waterlooville one in Hampshire, but she's the sitting MP, so it's slightly different. But, is good politics from Jenrick? Are you worried about him?
Look, I mean, Robert's a mate, is still a mate. And I think anybody who goes to call it out, brilliant. But we cannot forget that Robert was the immigration minister.
Absolutely.
And so, look, I spoke out...
He'd argue he did resign on principle because...
No, but how many years was he an MP? Sorry, a minister?
The numbers were shooting through the roof whilst he was immigration minister.
Even as a backbencher, I was speaking out, holding debates and challenging the government. But look, I don't want to focus on Robert. I want to focus on the people. Look, the British public didn't ask for this. They've had no say in this with both governments. And I wouldn't want it on my doorstep. And You know, I don't blame every parent out there going out to peacefully protest for your children's safety and your children's future. I found it heartbreaking, some of the recent cases, which obviously we won't go into the legal aspects of them, but as a parent, you know, we shouldn't no longer have to put up with this. But it's not going to change while we continue to be soft-touch Britain, which creates this pull, and they keep coming out.
So what would reform do?
Well,
say we have an election in 4 years.
Absolutely.
Nigel Farage is Prime Minister. What's happening on day one?
Well, on that press conference we did in London, about 6 weeks ago, Nigel said, look, about my comment about tents, we would process them, you know, you sort of agreed with it, but we'd process them, send them back. We're looking into a host country to send them to as well. But the most important thing is we've got to stop these benefits. We've got to stop them getting cinema tickets, stop them going in HMOs, which is actually...
Would you turn them back?
We've got to turn them back. That's the only thing we can do.
Okay.
And on top of that, stop them getting a daily allowance. If we are no longer freebie Britain, then they will not want to come here.
Will, your thoughts?
Billy's wrong. This is not some long-term project. If you adopt the Australian model when it comes to stopping the boats will stop in a matter of weeks, not months. If you make a public proclamation that if you get on a dinghy from Calais and arrive on the beaches of the United Kingdom or England, you will never be allowed to settle here permanently. The boats will stop in a matter of weeks. Yeah. This is not a 6 to 9 month project. This is something which can be stopped immediately. Yeah. The reason why Labor are saying this is because instinctively, in their heart of hearts, they don't really want to stop it. It's not a part of their core ideology.
Absolute rubbish. You know, I've said many times...
I agree with you, Will.
I've said many times before on this show, the last Labour government dramatically cut asylum numbers, but it took time. And anyone suggesting that you can cut numbers just like that is either fooling themselves or misleading...
Why don't you just turn them back, Bill?
Well, OK, you could do that if we withdraw from the 1951 Refugee Convention. I don't think that's the right approach. But people who are genuinely fleeing for their lives, as a civilised country, we should process...
They travel through so many safe countries to get here.
Absolutely.
And that is the issue.
And do you know what? When we were in the European Union, Andrew, we had a mechanism to dealing with that. We're now, post hoc, having to reconstruct...
Well, we're paying France and they've got no motivation because they don't want to keep them, do we? It's ridiculous.
We've actually had the first migrants returned to France. I think in 6 months' time, as the numbers ramp up, you're going to begin to struggle to say that's not the right approach.
Can I suggest something that I think I'm observing that's happening across the country, which is this is getting so out of control that I think you're getting to a point where people who previously didn't really take much notice of politics or news or the migrant situation, and even people who did, are now... It's not just about illegal migrants. I am sensing, and I'm seeing online especially, a complete wave of we don't want anyone here. We don't want legal migrants, we don't want genuine refugees, we don't want illegal migrants. And the longer this nonsense goes on, the more I suspect you're going to get more extreme views like that.
I accept that. And look, you know, I can argue that the boat crossings are only 3% of net migration, but they're very visible and very tangible to people. And that's why it's so important the government does tackle it.
Can I show you something?